Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm Jen. I'm the Vice President of Client Success at Tritons, and welcome to Tritons' 30-minute webinar on getting your team up and running on the path to success. The objective of this webinar is to provide you with some helpful information to keep in mind while forming and developing your customer success team, or any team for that matter. Before we dive into the topic, I just want to give you a brief introduction on who we are and what we do. Tritons is an IT consulting company. We were established in 2006, and our focus is helping our clients drive profitable customer success and accelerated software adoption. We consider ourselves to be the glue that binds SaaS vendors to buyers by making sure both are successful, because we truly believe that one cannot be successful without the other. Our specialty is delivering fast and effective consulting and training services to meet our client needs, such as how to turn your customer success team into a revenue-generating profit center rather than a customer support cost center. So today we'll have Diane and myself as your webinar presenters. So we'll just take a moment to give you a little bit about our backgrounds. I've been in the IT and user adoption field for about 18 years now. My educational background is in business administration and organizational development, and I've had the pleasure of working with a variety of companies and industries over the years. I'd say that most of my career has been leading adoption efforts for large-scale, enterprise-wide technology implementations, and I've both witnessed and personally experienced the struggle that comes with developing effective teams that have the ability and the capacity to lead change initiatives. As a result, I've made it my career mission to help individuals and help teams overcome those barriers that often get in the way of working together effectively, especially during times of change. And now I'd like to present my co-host, Diane.
Hello, everyone. I'm Diane Mazzoli, a principal at Tritons. And I started out consulting in operations management and process redesign a while back, but for the last 20 years or so have been focused on, primarily organizational effectiveness and transformational change. I've headed up consulting projects in the US as well as internationally, and they've often been in this IT and user adoption realm. My background is actually similar to Jen's in business administration and organizational development. And I really gravitated to this business because I like putting critical thinking and creative problem solving to work on these organizational transformation efforts. And I always like to take great care to build those trusting and collaborative relationships with client teams that have been given that huge responsibility for the success of their companies. Which brings us, I guess, to the topic of today's webinar, getting your team, up and running on the path to success. What we know from both our client experiences and internally at Tritons is that team success seldom happens in a straight line or without a hitch or two. And that's in the top half of this slide. I remember that person actually being me. Maybe it's been you too, thinking, oh yeah, I've got this covered. I've done all the right stuff up front. I've laid the groundwork. I've got this great team, fantastic attitude, and we're all excited to get this project going. And then, suddenly and without warning, reality meets us head on. And those best laid plans bump up against the nature of change, and they bump up against new teams in the midst of change. It would seem to be a straightforward and easy path, but often our experience is one of challenges one after another. When one problem gets solved, another one pops up somewhere else, kind of whack-a-mole style. It's just never a straight line to team success.
So true.
So where do some of these challenges actually lie? You may have seen this phases of team development before. Typically, when teams are forming, there's excitement at the prospect of working together and for the task at hand, and actually everyone's on their best behavior at this point. But then comes this period of uncertainty. The team members are still figuring out how to relate to one another. They're moving into this storming phase where they realize they've got differing work styles, and it often results in some frustration and some stress that you observe, especially as a team leader. With some clarifications about roles and goals and internal processes, the team actually begins to move into that norming phase when there's this, more of an understanding and appreciation of each other's strengths. And this is where you start to see that stronger commitment to the team's goals and the progress that you're making toward those goals. Once the team reaches that performing stage, team members really can, they know and they begin to trust one another. They realize their interdependence and they become more problem-solving and solutions-focused. I remember on a recent user adoption project, we designed a team approach where we were pairing up several of our internal client team members with our own internal consultant team members, and everybody was new to each other. And the effect on the team development was actually compounded. There was no question that each client consultant pair went through each and every one of these stages and at different points in time. But the important thing to remember here is that every one of these stages or phases is normal. And as a team leader, it's your role to anticipate and to support team members as they move through these phases.
It's so true. I recently delivered a training session in which I included this slide in the training materials. And at the very end of the 3-day training course, one of the participants came up to me and said that this slide really resonated with him. And I was a bit taken aback. I mean, I think it's important information, but I didn't realize it would, of all the slides, this is the one that was going to really have a powerful impact on him. So I asked him why. Why did this resonate with you? And he said he had been on several teams, I think he said a half dozen teams, that actually disbanded once they got to the storming phase because they didn't realize that was normal. They really took that as a sign that this project was doomed to fail, so why even bother? And he, realized how much success was missed by what those teams could have done had they known that they could move past the storming phase. That's an important piece of a phase of development of a team, but that this isn't the end. You can get past it, but it's an important phase to go through. There's another slide that we like to share with our clients, and that's the change curve. And it really illustrates how our level of optimism changes over the life of a project. For example, at the start of a project, team members are excited. There's this feeling that anything is possible, and optimism is really high. However, as time goes on and things get a bit more complicated, you have more problems to address, that level of optimism starts to decrease, and it turns into doubt. And then before you know it, you're in the dreaded valley of despair. It's that point at which you or your team members feel like giving up, like this desired end state, it just isn't possible, it's just not worth the effort, and we see this all the time with our clients. We actually hear them say, oh my God, I think we're in the valley of despair. And once they can poke a little fun at themselves and where they're at and recognize where they're at, it's much easier to ask for help and to take the right actions to move past that valley of despair so that you can get into the hope, confidence, and satisfaction as you achieve your goals. It's important to note that people go through this cycle at different times, and this cycle may occur multiple times within a project. So just be aware of it, recognize it as it's happening, and help your team members. Help your team members push past this valley of despair, knowing that it is going to happen at some point in your project, and possibly multiple times.
No, exactly, Jen. And of course, team conflict tends to be the highest when people are feeling at their lowest in that dreaded valley of despair. And so that's when you need, as a team leader, to put some extra effort into addressing people's emotional needs and supporting each other. And be aware of your own emotions, too, of how your personality, what your personality is and how you personally handle conflict yourself. It may even warrant calling a timeout, carving out a little chunk of time to work on the team dynamics and the relationship building. That short pause at that point can actually speed up the overall process of resolving the conflict and building trust and moving out of that valley of despair. If not, the conflict, can continue to emerge, which could cause your productivity to suffer, and as you were mentioning earlier, Jen, you could actually have the project derail, or you perceive the project as derailing as a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So to help your team move faster and more effectively through these phases that we've just discussed, you really need to make sure that you have alignment of 6 core elements for success, which are vision, content and process expertise, program structure, tools and methods, skilled people doing the work, and team management and oversight. Because without any of these elements, your team will struggle and your project either won't get off the ground or it could quickly turn south. So let's take a couple of examples here. So you need to set a clear vision that people can understand and see themselves a part of. If that clear vision isn't present, then the result will be confusion for the team. From a content and process perspective, you need to determine who and how the work's going to get done, or your team members will experience unnecessary anxiety. You also need to determine how priorities and decisions will be made. How is information going to be shared among your team, between your team and other teams within your organization? Without that, you can expect to experience significant delays in your plans due to a lack of program structure. You also need to determine what tools and methods will be used to help your team members perform their roles and responsibilities, or you will probably experience some false starts with your project. You also need to have the skills and the capacity to do the work, so you'll need to determine what competencies do my team members need and what training might they need to develop those competencies. Otherwise, you and your team members are going to experience frustration. And lastly, team management and oversight is critical. As the manager of a team, your team success hinges on your ability to set and evaluate performance expectations, as well as provide your team members with feedback, rewards, and consequences for either missing, meeting, and/or exceeding performance expectations. So how do you get your team members to meet your performance expectations? So there's a simple yet effective formula to always keep in mind, which is performance is driven by 2 factors, ability and motivation. Ability is can they? Do your team members have the knowledge, skills, and abilities they need? Do they understand what's needed? Do they understand what's expected? Motivation, on the other hand, is will they? Is this a priority for them? Will they make the time for it? Will your team members stop doing what they've always been doing and start doing what you need them to do? So as a manager, you need to constantly be asking yourself, do your team members have the ability to do what I need them to do? And are they motivated to do what I need them to do? If either one is missing, then you can expect to run into problems. So Diana's going to give us a bit more information on how to drive desired actions and behaviors for success.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the ability, the can they portion of the equation. One of the unintended consequences and ironies of a technology implementation, for example, is that while the speed at which technology can be deployed has actually increased, the rate at which the organization can actually adopt that change may have slowed. And that's because in comparison, the technology side is easy. The technology, it does what it tells you to do. It's that human element that complicates matters and requires you to focus more on the people and the organization. And here's why. Introducing new technology kicks off this chain reaction within the organization. It's a chain reaction of change. New systems, come with new business processes. Think about it. Not only new business processes, new policies, new roles, new responsibilities. And people need to unlearn those old ways of working, and they need to develop new behaviors for using the new system and doing their new jobs. That whole thing that changes the skills and the competencies that they need, and it alters those performance expectations down the road too. So implementing a new system, as I said, as an example, doesn't necessarily make anyone's job any easier, at least initially, because it fundamentally changes jobs and how people spend their time. It's really important to understand the extent of those changes and then determine what's what do we really need to support people in these changes that are upon us? The other part of that equation, the capability portion of the equation, that will they, the motivation portion of the equation, is also key to understanding your team members. There's this statistic that we've learned. Did you know that it takes a minimum of 66 days for people to form new habits? And that's when they're actually highly motivated to do so. Motivation is really an internal thing to an individual. You can't prescribe that across the board to your team. While you can make some assumptions, of course, to truly understand motivation requires that you listen, that you watch for all those unspoken cues about what matters to your individual team members. Team members they're motivated by different things depending upon individual tastes, cultural preferences, their age, the position in their career. So those are the kinds of things that need to be considered when thinking about rewards and recognition and motivation and motivating behavior within your team. So the takeaway here as a leader for you is to examine motivation through those different lenses to know what actions, the reward structures, the incentive programs, the KPIs for your organization, which of those to leverage.
So now that we understand a bit more about the importance of ability and motivation, where should you focus your efforts? So when developing a new team or implementing a new program, many organizations assume that they need to deliver training to make sure people have the knowledge and skills they need, which of course is very important. But don't assume that training, or perhaps more accurately, just training, is sufficient. We see this a lot with technology implementations. We often see that our clients immediately turn to systems training as a solution to get people to use a new system. But there are often larger organizational barriers at play that affect an individual's ability and motivation to use a new system, such as a misalignment between people, processes, policies, and expectations that get in the way of an individual using that system, even if they were highly motivated to do so. So those things need to be addressed as well. Like, you can't just depend on training such as system training to change someone's behavior. There's other things that you need to rely on as well, such as training as conditioning, which we refer to as big T versus little t. Your organization's culture, structure, reward systems all need to support and reinforce on a daily basis the behaviors, the actions, and the performance that you want to see from your team members, because you always get the behavior you are rewarding. That's really important to remember, especially as a manager of a team. You always get the behavior you're rewarding.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jen. Another place to focus your time and effort as a team leader is on developing SMART goals with your team. SMART, of course, is that acronym for goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, as you see in this slide. So that SMART tool helps you and your team to really get specific and clear about your specific goals and expectations. It helps your team members know what to do and where to focus their time and effort. As a team leader, I think it's important to be aware of aligning those SMART goals too with the goals of the larger organization, sort of aligning the structure from the goals on high to your team goals. As they're aligned, there's more probability of success as you go through your implementation, if that's what you're working on. I'm just thinking of a company that we're working with where we engaged in some work on SMART goals in particular. And there were several, independent deployment teams within the client structure, and they were across the country. Not all of the deployment teams spent the time to ground themselves in those SMART goals, partly because there's a commitment to, an investment that needs to be made in that. This process requires some time. It requires team discussion. A lot of the teams needed to go through multiple iterations of that until they were actually satisfied with their results. So, when I think about it, though, that very process, thinking back to one of those earlier slides on the phases of team development, that actually helped align the teams and their ability to perform down the road. That they committed, they identified them, they committed to those SMART goals that they together had developed. So, and then, of course, from those SMART goals, you can then start thinking through and prioritizing tasks and responsibilities that actually align to those SMART goals. So it all sort of cascades and makes sense.
It does. And I think as we've worked with clients who sometimes struggle with developing their SMART goals, one of the really valuable byproducts of it is in that struggle, they are developing a common language and a shared understanding of what it is they're trying to accomplish. And then having that in the form of SMART goals is something that they reference back to quite a bit, especially as things get more complicated and tricky. They can go back and say, okay, what was it that we were trying to achieve in the first place? And do we need to evaluate or evolve these SMART goals based on what's happening in their environment at that time? So it's a really valuable tool, but it is tricky, and we've seen a lot of clients struggle through it, but there's also a lot of value in that struggle.
Right, and that whole point about continuing to monitor and evolve and continuously improve, this is not a static exercise at all. So, let's talk about kind of putting this into action a bit, pulling it all together. I think it's really, important to make it clear to your team what behaviors you expect to see, as you were saying, Jen, and include those as part of your plans and your reviews. Keep people motivated. To do that, you need to let them know that you are paying attention to those little things that they do that make a big difference to the organization. And that recognition helps the team members understand what is valued and that they are valued as contributors to the goals of the organization. I guess our experience, mine anyway, has been that to do that, you need to take the time to think through and align those incentives and rewards to the SMART goals. Avoid those situations where you're hoping for, this behavior, but you're actually rewarding a different one. And also by adjusting incentives and rewards that you discover, you do this by trial and error a little bit, but you discover that they're misaligned. So you need to adjust and monitor, evolve, and continuously improve them, as we were just talking about. But incentivize people in real time, while they're working on learning these new processes and these new systems is important. And it's important to agree, to communicate those performance metrics that you've all agreed to, kind of keep them front and center. Be clear about, who's measuring them, how often they're getting measured, and again, just kind of monitoring and evolving them as needed.
It's really important. And here we just have a couple of questions that will help you check to see if your team is heading down the right path to success. So for example, is your team stuck in the storming phase? Is your team experiencing confusion, anxiety, delays, frustration, and or low quality in performance? Are you struggling in that dreaded valley of despair? Is conflict getting in the way of success? Are you experiencing ability and motivational challenges or struggling with developing SMART goals to support your strategy? And last but not least, are you struggling to get the right behaviors and actions from your team members to achieve your goals? So if you answered yes to any of these questions, then take that as a good indication that your team isn't set up for success yet, and you should consider letting us help you achieve the immediate and long-term results that you want and need from your team. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a variety of consulting and training services to meet our clients' unique needs, budget, and timeline. We have in-person and online training courses. that are designed to get your team off to a great start. We also have consulting packages on program development, implementation, management, and optimization for profitable customer success and accelerated software adoption. Our services are off the shelf, as well as they can be tailored to our customers' unique needs to accelerate results. We do have a full menu of our service offerings, as well as additional helpful resources on our website at www.tritons.com. And please let us know if we can help you in any way. We welcome the opportunity to talk with you and help you and your team succeed. So on behalf of our Tritons team, we thank you very much for your time today, and we hope to talk with you soon.
Thanks, everyone.